It's time. It's time to do it. Time to put together my final official predictions. We're going to go state by state, at least in the ones that are still questionable, which way they're going to go. They're going to go Trump, they're going to go Biden. But I don't want to just sit here and start clicking states. Before that, I want to get into my general overall theory as to why I think Joe Biden is going to win and by the margin that he is. But basically, my theory is that Joe Biden is about to put together one of the most massive coalitions of voters. Well, actually, the most massive coalition of voters in the history of U.S. politics for many reasons. So, first and foremost, over the last 4, 8, 12, 16 years, there's been a growing coalition of young people joining the electorate. And the young people have been growing up in this era of watching the Bushes, the Obamas, the Clintons, and all of these standard corporate establishment politicians that have been disappointing over and over and over again, if not disappointing, but actively moving the country in what we see as the wrong direction, not to mention the awful nature of what Trump has done to us over the last few years. Speaking of myself and people of like mind, which most young people are, go down the polls. I think there was an insane map after 2016 that if only 18 to 30-year-olds were the entire electorate, the entire United States, save for maybe like Alabama, would have been blue. Young people are going to come out. They have been stepped on and just disrespected in every which way throughout their entire lives, and now is a moment for them to come out in droves. And the early voting numbers are showing that young people are showing up. Biden is going to crush among young people. That also can, you throw into that group the progressives that have been enraged. Their angers have been stoked by this most awful of presidents, who's essentially a wannabe dictator. Anybody with eyes can see that, or lots of people kind of like Trump for the reasons that he might pad their pockets with a nice tax cut, and they'll look past the dictator rhetoric, assuming that the levers of government will rein him in. But I don't want to play with a person like that. I don't think it's whoove us to be allowing somebody who could be the next, you name it, Adolf Hitler, Mussolini, most notably Stalin. He's seemingly replicating his rhetoric as far as, I'm going to fire Fauci. I'm more right than the doctors. Get the doctors out of here. That kind of stuff. Just disgusting. It flies in the face of everything that any reasonable progressive agrees with. And again, enraged over the last 4 to 5 years. We are going to come out to remove this monster with a vengeance. Further, not only are the people that should be coming out, like the young people and the progressives, but Trump also has dwindled his support in the populations that he won by a landslide, actually, in 2016. Most notably, suburban folk and old people. Basically, two groups that Trump won in 2016 is one of the reasons that he put it over the edge. Hillary Clinton did not excite suburban folks so much. She did not excite older folks so much. She didn't give them a reason to be excited for her. Trump kind of by default had that vote go to him. You look down the polls this time, one of the most notable stories, Donald Trump losing both suburban folks and old people. If you lose those two groups, and in a significant margin, and you add in the fervor from the progressives and the young people, you are starting to put together a massive, massive coalition. Not only that, but people who are or were in the Republican Party who see Joe Biden as a safe option for them. Joe Biden is Republican light. He is a conservative in many respects. That is actually very palatable for a lot of conservatives who like conservative politics but don't like the Trump branding of it. Again, polling showing that more people who had voted for Trump in 2016 are flipping over to vote for Biden. Then people who voted for Hillary are going to vote for Trump this time. So a net there, as well as more or less people, less Republicans supporting Donald Trump. It was something like 92% of Republicans supporting Trump compared to 95% of Democrats supporting Biden. So even a net as there as well, if you're looking at that as well. So Republican defectors, again, adding to this already massive electorate. I should have also mentioned independents, but we'll talk independents and third-party voters. Trump, and by the way, you can look up, go look up polls of your own. I have some here just to maybe give you an idea. If we're looking at senior citizens, just to make clear my last point, Democrat leading among senior citizens 51 to 44, whereas Trump won handily among seniors 53 to 44. I'm using the IBD TIPP poll, which actually I feel this year is slightly misrepresenting the national picture. Most of the national picture is showing a about an 8-point lead in this final slew of polls. You're looking at upper tier 11 to 12, lower tier Rasmussen is the Republican deep red leaning poll. They even still have Biden up by 1. IBD is a lot more generous to Trump in the polls as well. Average these out, and we're looking at about 8.4, 8.5, even considering some of these far left or far right leaning polls and the ones that are a little more generous to Trump. Realistically, we're looking at about an 8 to 10 point lead nationally. Of course, state by state things differ, but that is the reflection of this massive coalition that Biden is putting together, including now seniors, as we just showed, and as well suburban voters, which they list here as well. So just to get you a little bit of, just so that I'm not sitting here talking out my ass. So the electorate, the coalition grows. Not to mention third-party voters. Biden or Hillary had lost third-party voters, or there were a significant number of voters who went to both Jill Stein and to Gary Johnson in 2016. Lots and lots and lots of voters. Let's say about 3 to 5% per state going to that third party. Now only looking at about 1 to 2%, and Joe Biden crushing it in those third parties. So it's safe to assume Joe Biden taking a lot of the Libertarian vote and a lot of the Green Party vote. Trump is not getting that. That's further growth to Joe Biden's coalition. Minorities, people have been saying that, or it's been apparent that Joe Biden's lost some support among Hispanics. However, he may be making it up with African Americans who have been brutalized over this last 4 years. I don't want to hear about low black unemployment. You don't get black people on your side by inciting 1850s era politics and galvanizing the far right and galvanizing people like the Proud Boys, white supremacists, not denouncing white supremacists. I mean, I can't imagine being a black person in America and seeing this man and bringing up these visceral feelings of a time that we have since moved forward from. So black people, my gut feeling, are going to show up for Biden in ways akin to that of Obama. Of course, you have the Obama-Biden ticket. Whether or not you think they did enough for black people, they commuted many sentences for nonviolent drug offenses in their term. As well, I would agree they could have done much, much, much more. They did not decriminalize marijuana, among other things. But that being said, I think Biden is growing his coalition again with black people, not so much with Hispanics, although he still maintains a sizable lead among Hispanics, and so they are still part of that coalition. And finally, probably just the general normie Democrat, the kind of people that we saw show up in the primary, that showed up in droves, that led to these enormous blowout victories for Biden early in the primary, like in South Carolina, seemingly coming out of nowhere with this massive, massive wave of just normie, run-of-the-mill Democrats who are sick and tired of what they have seen. This is just the bulk of the coalition. A lot of the rest of these can be tracked under this umbrella, but there are some pure normies in there as well. I have them as the resistance. But putting this all together, there is a lot that has swung towards Joe Biden and the Democrats. There is really not much to be found swinging towards Trump. Maybe you can say Hispanics. How is that going to reflect on Election Day? The Democrats still lead there by default. And so what can you say? What can you do if you're Trump at this point? It's really not looking good. And for that reason, we go ahead and put together this map. So what we have here right off the bat, what is in blue and what is in red are the states. So everything that's blue right now is going to go to Biden, and everything that's red is going to go to Trump. Essentially being that is what the overwhelming majority of the polls are looking towards. Of course, we have things like Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan going blue. You're going to say, well, those went to Trump last time. Can you really be saying? Yeah, realistically, the race was a lot closer. The dynamics of the race were such that Michigan and Wisconsin, and as you'll notice, we don't have Pennsylvania bubbled in because that's looking like it's going to be the closest. Were very, very close. And you had the fervor on one side, and you had the nothing support of Hillary Clinton on the other. And Trump barely was able to eke out those states in a perfect storm situation when there's zero enthusiasm on the other side and immense enthusiasm on your side. Even in that case, Trump kind of had a weak showing in those states like Wisconsin and Michigan at a time like this where Trump has only lost parts of his coalition, the suburbs, and older voters. These states are essentially closed off unless some fuckery goes on, especially if you're looking at Wisconsin where the Supreme Court just ruled in favor of the Republicans, in favor of not counting ballots. That's something that's a wild card. But even so, the polling in Wisconsin, the polling in Michigan have been so decisive as to suggest that even if there's a massive swing, even if you factor in ballots getting tossed out, not getting counted, it's insurmountable at this point that Trump comes close in those states. Sure, he could bring it to within 3 to 5 percentage points. I don't think he has a chance of winning those. Then we go to Arizona. Hillary Clinton having lost that, Democrats not having won that since Clinton some years back. But I'm going to go ahead and give Arizona to Joe Biden. Now, you're looking at this. We're already at 269. Oh, shit. This is a tough map for Trump. He has every single card stacked against him, even more so in 2016, and he barely crossed the finish line in 2016. That's why there's so much talk about how really the only way he can hope to win this thing is if he does some crazy bullshit on election night and declares victory in the face of defeat, challenges it in the courts, stirs up his base, tries to incite violence, any number of nonsense. I'm calling it the final con. And I'm coining that term right here, right now. The final con will be Trump attempting to, and I know he's discussing this with his campaign staff, that they're going to attempt to declare victory in an effort to incite or to cause the public to join onto his side. However, we're going to be obviously fighting that tooth and nail. However, Trump needs something to happen in order to do that. Trump needs Texas to be leaning red, and he also needs Florida to be leaning red, and he also needs a number of other states leaning red at that point. If he even is hoping, and if he's even hoping to call some sort of a victory, he needs every single one of these states to be red on election night. Why is that not going to happen, and why is this plot going to be foiled? Well, Texas is having a year like no other, where the turnout has already surpassed, I think we hit 100% of the total votes cast in 2016 in Texas like 3 or 4 days ago. And so since then I haven't checked, but they're already surging past that. On election day, they're going to surge another bit past that. You could be looking at 150% of the total. The polling in Texas is extremely close. The polling in Texas has been dead tied. And my idea is that as the sample size of the polling goes up and as the quality of the poll that is tracking goes up, the lead tends to skew towards Biden. The trend tends to skew towards Biden if there are more people sampled and if the poll quality is better. I think there's going to be one of these stories of the suburbans, the young people, the progressives, the old people, the Republican defectors, the third-party voters, minorities. Texas is just that in a nutshell. Texas is a very interesting state. I think there could be enough fervor, enough there in Texas to actually bring that home when all of the dice are cast. And not only that, Trump's plan is foiled because there will have been the mail-in ballots being counted in addition to the day of ballots counted. However, the former more so than the latter, at least initially, Democrats tend to vote more by mail. And so Democrats have been stacking up votes against Trump in Texas for weeks now. For weeks and weeks and weeks. That's what's going to be reflected, at least initially, on election day. Texas is going to be looking blue before it is looking red. And if that's the case, Trump doesn't have the possibility to claim early victory. He just can't do it. He would look like an absolute moron and a madman, which he already does. He has no shame in doing so. But nobody is going to believe you. Nobody's going to buy into your narrative that you're winning if you are clearly down in Texas, which I guarantee you he will be looking like he's down in Texas. However, as the days roll on, if it's a close enough race, is it possible that those day of ballots swing back towards Trump? Of course. And I think that's very likely, actually. And I'm actually a little bit disillusioned by the fact that there's been stories of voter suppression. The Texas governor only putting one ballot box per like 100 miles or something stupid like that. Clear voter suppression. There was a story in one of the big cities that 170,000 ballots are in the middle of being disqualified. They're largely minority ballots. Of course, minorities go overwhelmingly towards Biden. If it's 170,000 votes, that could be, something like 100,000, 120,000 for Biden, a swing towards Trump. That kind of stuff bothers me. We've seen similar stories in Georgia, in previous elections. I mean, of course, across the South, the voter suppression is rampant. I think if the die were just cast, no voter suppression, no nothing like that, in a fair and free election, Texas would go this time around to Biden just because of this massive coalition that he has gathered, and that has defected from Trump or has risen up in resistance to Trump. So Texas, I would have going to Biden. As a matter of fact, I think it's going to be very, very devastating to Trump on election day to be seeing that. Further, Hillary Clinton only lost Florida by a percentage point. Florida was very, very close. And if there's anything that makes up Florida, what is it? Old people. Old white folk. And guess what? Florida's been doing a mail-in ballot election for years. Essentially, this election for Florida is no different. This is just run-of-the-mill election time for Florida. If, again, that was the result in 2016, Hillary Clinton having almost beaten Trump in Florida. Again, highlighting the fact that Trump's performance really wasn't that strong. Considering Hillary Clinton was the most awful candidate, she was still able to almost win a Florida. Not to mention Obama won Florida twice. Realistically, Florida is more blue than not these days. In a year like this, where there is such a coalition building behind Joe Biden, and the fact that he's winning older voters. Sure, he's losing the Cuban vote. However, the Puerto Rican vote there is canceling it out. He has an immense opportunity to not just win Florida, but to really make it not even a close. Some of the polls showing Trump winning by 1, some Biden by 2, but there's also been a slew of polls, even just recently, showing Biden up by 3, 4, 5, 6 points in Florida. If you average that down, looking at like 3 to 4 points, I think Biden's coalition, I think Biden's lead in Florida is going to reflect on election day. I don't think it's going to be close. I don't think Florida is going to be that close. I think Biden wins pretty handily in Florida. And again, cutting into Trump's narrative or his plot, his final con to claim a victory on election night, if you're down in Arizona, if you're down in Texas, if you're down in Florida, again, mail-in voting for Florida, nothing different. Going to reflect on election day that he's down. Of course, that's going to shift over time. Biden or Trump can't make a case. Trump just cannot make a case. Finally, or not finally, next. We go into what I call Biden territory. I should have mentioned I consider Nevada. I had automatically blue. Hillary Clinton won Nevada. I don't think any state that Hillary won, Biden isn't capable of winning. Just for the number of reasons. Hillary Clinton, weakest, worst candidate, most unpalatable, unlikable, maybe in the history of politics, was able to win Nevada. Joe Biden, exceedingly more popular than her, has an exceedingly growing coalition, not to mention the defectors from Trump who are just going to be joining that. Biden wins Nevada, Biden wins Arizona. My other thought is that these Biden country states like North Carolina, where you have a significant older population, you have a significant minority population, black population, extremely excited, extremely invigorated, going to show up. North Carolina not being that close in 2016, Trump did win it, but I just believe that these kinds of states, my idea generating from the primary season, again, where Joe Biden had this monstrous showing in South Carolina out of nowhere. He dropped a bomb on Bernie Sanders and wiped him out of the race, essentially. If there are similar minded folk, if there is a similar energy generated in a North Carolina, South Carolina, North Carolina, similar dynamic, although North Carolina a little bit bluer, a lot bluer actually. I think North Carolina could go to Biden again in a similar fashion as Florida by 2 to 3 points. It could be. Again, that could get squeezed down with mail-in ballots getting canceled out and voter suppression. Maybe we're looking at a very, very, very tight race. We are looking at a very tight race in North Carolina. But I think it's very possible that Joe Biden wins that. Additionally, Biden been showing up and showing out in Georgia. Really been holding a lead there throughout this entire race. Similar dynamics. Biden country, Biden territory, large minority voters, older voters, Republican defectors. Georgia almost gave the governorship to Stacey Abrams, which was only essentially taken away from her by what we talked about, the voter suppression that was done. That was an extremely close race. She only lost by about a percentage point. That was in, I think, 2018. Georgia been trending blue. This coalition could come out and dominate in Georgia and take that one for Biden. Now, what we're looking at is a Biden landslide. We're looking at an utter decimation of Trump in this upcoming election. I am in the camp that's saying I don't think this is going to be close. I don't think this is going to be close at all. At this point, even having Pennsylvania go to Trump, it's not going to make a difference. Even if the court makes some sham ruling that you can't count the ballots, etc., etc., Pennsylvania is leaning blue anyway. And some of the last few polls, again, were up 6-7. Realistically, Pennsylvania is not even as close as North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Texas, Arizona. I'm just worried about Pennsylvania because of certain court rulings and some meddling that could go on. Pennsylvania, more likely than not, is going to go to Biden as well. And again, not really going to be close. That is really how this election is shaping up in my eyes. Joe Biden having a massive, monstrous showing, putting together the biggest coalition in the history of American politics, and proving to Trump country that they are not in charge, that they are not the voice of the people. The voice of this country, the soul of this country is very much different. I think that's going to reflect. I didn't even get into Iowa and Ohio, which I should mention. I think they're going to hang on Trump. I just think there's not enough of this coalition. I think they're too homogenous in the way that it's just too many white people. There's too many white folk, too bland, not enough going on there. I think there's enough. I think there's enough Trump country, enough farm country, enough wide open space. It seems that as the spaces get more wide open, people tend to go Trump more. Maybe they're not talking to each other enough about what's going on. Who knows? I don't have a lot of faith in Iowa and Ohio, although Iowa and Ohio are close, just like any other of these, which is a nightmare for Trump. He has gotten to the point where every single one of these states could go to Biden, could go to Trump, but so many of them leaning towards Biden. If 1, 2, 3 of those go to Biden, the door shuts, and then that's it. But realistically, I would say it's likely that Biden wins Iowa more so than Ohio. I'm going to keep Ohio in Trump territory, no matter what. If anything, I mean, Trump pulled some bullshit in Nebraska, leaving his voters out to die, literally in the cold, and that was right on the border with Ohio. Iowa is polling very closely, so that could have been something that discussed and swung it in this direction. Not to mention cases, the coronavirus surging in Iowa. When cases are surging of the coronavirus, that reflects poorly on Trump. People tend to move away from Trump at that point. The deck is stacked against Trump in every single way except for the fact that he is currently the president and he wields the power and he has the courts on his side. However, in the face of a landslide defeat, which he is about to receive, there's not going to be much he can do. He can whine and cry and bitch and moan and do whatever he wants, but if the American people have spoken in the greatest democracy in the history of the world, somebody like Trump, a wannabe dictator, racist, one of the most awful humans in the country, is not going to ruin this thing for all of us. He's just not. And I think that's how it's going to shape up. What is the worst case scenario? Worst case scenario, Iowa falls, Pennsylvania gets jacked, Biden doesn't do as well in Georgia, Texas gets picked off, Florida, I honestly don't even see, I can't see Florida going red, considering what happened last time. North Carolina, since it's close, Arizona, since it's close. I mean, no matter how many states I try to pick off, we give him Wisconsin as well because of that court ruling. No matter how many states I try to pick off in being generous, I just can't do it. I can't see it. Again, he would have to win again Michigan, but Michigan is looking like it's in blowout territory once again, with those coalitions running back to Biden. So this is my floor. I'm going to go ahead and say this is my floor for Biden, about 277. But as you saw previously, this is going to be my final prediction. Biden, sweeping Biden country, as in Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, North Carolina, Georgia, and Virginia, calling Biden country, as well as not stealing, but just winning back. Trump's the only one trying to steal an election here, realistically. Winning back Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, the big three that swung it to Trump, and then just not holding on to Iowa and Ohio, which are just too white for their own good. And that's my final election map. Biden, 387 electoral votes. Trump, 151 electoral votes in something of a massive landslide. The only thing that could change that, should Texas go to Trump, which it's likely that it does, we're looking at 350, still an unbelievable landslide defeat for Donald Trump. And yeah, that's what we're looking at. That's what this thing is going to be. And only thing left to do is wait and see about tomorrow. So, that's my final prediction. Biden with about 350 to 380, depending on what goes on in little Texas there. The rest I'm feeling pretty good about. So, let me know what you think. Let me know what your predictions are. And we'll see you, maybe we'll do a recap after the fact and see how correct or how horribly wrong I was about these things. So yeah, we will see. Peace.